I'm Scott Allen Miller. It's the 16th of September, 2023. This is my vlog of daily life living in León, Nicaragua. And today I actually have some viewer questions. Thank you so much to everyone who wrote in questions, because I do put out these constant calls for questions because I'm like, I need stuff to talk about. What do you guys need me to talk about? And that helps me a lot. I know it may feel like you're like imposing or something, but seriously, you're not. The questions really make my life a lot easier, so thank you. We're going to be answering specifically some questions today about flights from the area and where you can travel and some ways to come in, so specifically talking about some of that, and a little bit about walkability in Managua. Suddenly I'm in the shadows and this is probably not the best image, but that's okay. We're going to fix all that right after the bump. Someone did mention on the show that they appreciated getting to see me sometimes walk away from my camera, even if it's not very far. It really shows that I'm not worried about leaving in places. Of course, I'm a little bit more remote today, but I am in Los Altos de Veracruz. It looks kind of wild and fieldy here, but I'm right against the back wall of houses. I'm very close to some housing locations. I am shooting on the GoPro 12 today. All right, let's start off with some questions that some people send in. Thank you so much again. It really means a lot that I have people sending in questions. It's great to have the engagement. And before we get started, if you have questions, and if I don't answer what you're looking for today, just scroll down. If you're on a TV, you'll have to go to a computer or whatever, but on a phone or on a computer, you can scroll down just a little bit and you can just say hi. You can ask questions, leave comments, whatever on the show. That doesn't just help me come up with content, which is super awesome, thank you, but it also helps encourage YouTube to show the show. It shows engagement and lets YouTube know that the content we're making here is meaningful to more people. So absolutely get down there, say hello, or ask questions. That's fantastic. While I was looking up the first question, the wind picked up my camera and knocked it over. So we moved just a little bit so we'd be on flatter ground. All right, I'm looking at my phone, and Squeaker Rat asked the question, I'm curious about air travel to Central America from Managua or Liberia. I know there are buses, but curious about regional air travel. So what he means is, I have no idea. When you're coming from this region, you may want to travel to other parts of Central America, specifically Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, El Salvador, and Panama, right? We're mentioning Costa Rica and Nicaragua. Presumably you would not fly between Costa Rica and Nicaragua because they are so close. We share a land border and they're so close that you go to the other country from time to time to use their airports in both directions. Because, for example, for us, if we want to fly to Houston, we have Southwest flying out of Liberia, Costa Rica. But if you want to fly to Dallas or Miami, we have Spirit flying out of Managua. So Costa Ricans sometimes want to use Managua Airport and sometimes Nicaraguans want to use the Costa Rican airport. More likely you're going to go south to Costa Rica, but both situations exist. So is there a lot of regional travel? And the simple answer is no. There just isn't very much, but let's talk about what there is. So first of all, the airports in Nicaragua, which is only Managua, and in northern Costa Rica, which is only Liberia, there's also then San Jose slightly on the south side of the country, don't have a lot of regional connections. To the best of my knowledge, Liberia does not have any. It probably does have one or two minor connections, but they're not going to be too plentiful. From Managua, there are none. The only place that you can reach in all of the Central America zone, which is not technically Central America, is Panama City, right on the border of South America. So that's it's a fair distance, and you may want to do that, especially because Panama City is a wonderful location and it is a regional hub to some degree. So it's the hub for Copa Airlines. So if you wanted to fly, say, to Bogota or someplace further south, or you wanted to catch a connection somewhere else, you may want to use Panama City as a hub location. So it does make sense to potentially fly to Panama. If you're like me, I would lean towards taking the bus to Panama and then flying wherever you need to go. But if you're going on with Copa Airlines, you actually often get a better deal if you fly out of Managua. So it really depends what you're trying to do. If your goal is to get to Panama, I'm likely going to recommend the bus for most people. But if your goal is to go to Panama and hop beyond it, then flying into it probably provides the best deal. So that one is a legitimate hopper within the region. The advantage to the bus is that the majority of Panama, the country of Panama, lies west along the bus route from Panama City. If you're going to go to Panama City itself, it's roughly the farthest point of Panama. So if you're going to take a bus, you could stop in any number of locations within the country before you get to the capital. Whereas if you were going to go somewhere in the country and you fly in, you have to fly over all of Panama, get to the capital, and then find your way back. So it depends where you're trying to go. There's a lot of factors. Both flights and buses exist. If you're going to Costa Rica, you would not take a hopper. Even if one existed, the distance is ridiculously small and it's an easy drive. So the bus is going to, in most situations, outperform a potential airline, and because of that, there is not an airline. There's very few people who would take it, even if it did exist, because the bus is quick and easy. So those two are not going to have that. Now, unfortunately, going northbound, especially, we'll talk about Nicaragua because that's a certainty. Nicaragua has no regional hoppers. That one flight to Panama City is the closest thing to an exception, and it is 2 entire countries away, all the way on the border of the next continent. So we won't call that really an exception. It's just the first thing that comes up. The one spot that you can sometimes go, and this does exist, is El Salvador. In San Salvador, there is the flight on Avianca. Now, this is a really simple flight from Managua to San Salvador. There's very little in between, so it's extremely fast. However, Avianca in this region is an absolutely atrocious airline, and most of us generally consider that it does not exist. So while that hop does exist, I would never use it. Now, that said, Avianca in South America, I may easily use. That's primarily where they operate, out of Colombia, and they're well known for providing flights around South America. In North America, they operate out of El Salvador, and their reputation for running from that office is horrendous, and I would do anything possible to avoid them. We did try using them one time. They took advantage of us to an extreme degree, and what should have been a few $100s in flights turned into thousands of dollars of penalties as we became trapped in Miami completely for situations that they weren't just their fault for making mistakes. They engineered fake situations to cause the inability to fly out of Miami, which caused us to lose thousands of dollars and a lot of time that we weren't able to come home. I would absolutely avoid them. Now, they did that during COVID. I'm sure they're not as bad now, but I would never trust flying on Avianca through this region. So we generally just accept that that doesn't exist and don't consider it an option. But technically, there is a hop from Managua Airport to San Salvador Airport on the north side of El Salvador. That said, San Salvador is not generally considered a very big destination for people who are looking to go for vacation. If you're going to El Salvador, which is an excellent choice for vacationing or exploring the region, you're typically going to want to go either to the south of the country to someplace like the Ruta de Flores, or you're going to want to go to the west of the country to its world-famous surfing beaches. Although we also have pretty good surfing beaches here in Nicaragua, probably not on par with El Salvador, but very close. And so if you're a professional surfer, of course, you're going to just go to El Salvador. If you're just really interested in surfing, you may find them roughly equal. And so it's not the kind of thing that you would necessarily come to Nicaragua, do the beaches, and then go to El Salvador. That makes it a little bit tough that we compete in that type of tourism. But if you are going to be going to El Salvador, which of course is highly recommended, their food, their Ruta de Flores, their volcanoes, their nature hikes, there's a ton of beautiful things. And they do in the north have some beaches that are very different than Nicaragua that I would recommend, or maybe not beaches, but waterfront, coastal areas that are absolutely beautiful and very different than you find anywhere in Nicaragua or elsewhere in the region that I'm aware of. And so that can be very recommended simply because it's unique. So El Salvador is a great destination, but typically you're not going to fly into San Salvador to do that. If you're coming from someplace like León, we have the challenge that it is a 2-hour plus drive to the airport, plus you need to be there at least 2 hours early. That's between 4 and 5 hours of getting to your flight. Once you get on your flight, you have 1 to 2 hours in the air. Less than 2 for sure, and then you're in San Salvador. Then you are in an airport in northern El Salvador, and then you have to get transportation to take you wherever you want to go in the country. That's a lot of extra steps, and it adds up pretty quickly, and it's not going to be as cheap as the bus. For us coming from León, the bus will pick us up at home. It's like a shuttle. It's not really a bus from here. You can take the Tika bus, which is a big luxury bus. Here, we typically take a shuttle, which is just a passenger van. They'll pick you up at home, put your luggage on the roof. Very easy. They'll stop at a bathroom anywhere you want to go, and they drive straight to the places you are likely to want to go in El Salvador, which includes places very close to the start of the Ruta de Flores, which is the Route of Flowers. It is a driving route through beautiful small villages in the south of the country, and will drop you directly off at like Surf City and key beach destinations in the west. And so because of that, because it saves money and they pick you up from home and you don't have to deal with multiple steps of transportation, you don't have to worry about hiring a taxi or parking a car long term, pretty typically the bus here just outperforms the plane. Sure, you may be able to get there faster by plane, but only the tiniest bit. And the inconvenience and cost of it, even for people who really don't like traveling by car, will often offset it. So we see that as a very unpopular route if you want to see the rest of Central America, with key destinations being Tegucigalpa and the central Honduras, beautiful areas, or the islands in the north of Honduras. You have no flight options from here whatsoever. And if you want to go on to Guatemala, the same thing arises. Guatemala City, Antigua, and those areas, direct bus right to Antigua, super easy, a little bit farther for sure than El Salvador, but there's no flight into that area. So that is one we wish we had. The direct flight into Guatemala City would be amazing, and I truly hope that in the near future we see that get added to the flights coming out of Managua. That is something that we would use all the time. If they could do that for under $100, that is a local hopper, even if it's just a an 8-passenger plane with props, fantastic. I would do that regularly, maybe monthly, to go up and spend some time in Guatemala, which is by far my second favorite place to be in the region. If I'm going to be anywhere but Nicaragua, Guatemala City is the place I want to be. Not Antigua, which is nice, but it's a tourist location. The areas of northern Guatemala or the highlands or the Mayan areas, like the ruins, all that stuff's great to visit, but to actually go and just spend time as part of my regular routine, Guatemala City or possibly Xela, Quetzaltenango in the north of the country, those are the places that I want to be. So hoppers that go directly in there from a location here. Also, they could do a hopper straight out of Leon. Hint, hint to the airlines up there. This is something we'd love to see. Those are things we would do. Just hop between the cities and get to explore the region and do more things. Fantastic. But that is not something that existed anytime recently. We don't foresee it coming anytime in the near future. Because Guatemala City is the hub of this part of the world, it is the hub for the former Federated States of Central America. There is a certain drive for everything to be connected through there, even though it is not today. Currently, the closest thing we have to an airlines hub for the region is San Salvador. But San Salvador to Guatemala City is not a really far distance, and you can hop between them. Again, not necessarily on airlines you want to use, but it seems to be an improving situation. So in the future, there may be some options, but right now there really is nothing. And it's worth noting because the next question will be, okay, so I can't really fly anywhere in Central America, but I must be able to fly to southern Mexico. Cancun, Oaxaca, and areas like that are not that far away, but they're completely different regions. There must be flights, especially Cancun, because they have flights everywhere. Well, you're out of luck. No, there's no such thing. We do not have flights into that region at all. If you want to fly into Cancun, you're likely to have to fly to Guatemala City first to get a hopper there. And when we went there a year ago with Valentina, the flights between Cancun and Guatemala City were new. No one had talked about them yet. It was a brand new route. It was fantastic. It was very easy and cheap. Good airlines. So that process exists. But for us down here with Managua, we don't have that option. If I was going to go to Cancun from here, there's every possibility I'm either going to fly all the way to Mexico City and go on from there, or I'm going to take the bus all the way to Guatemala City and fly from there. That's how I would approach it. That brings up where does the flights actually go from Managua? Because this will answer most of your questions. To the south, it goes, or mostly to the east, it goes to Panama City as our one destination in that direction. If you want to go south, you're going to go through Panama City. Other than that, your choices are north. There is no east or west beyond that. Directly to the north, our nearest thing is San Salvador. Very limited flights, only the one airlines, not a good choice. The next one is Mexico City. This is only with Aeromexico, and it traditionally is quite expensive, but it is a great location to have a hop to absolutely anywhere in the world. Mexico City is one of the best connected airports anywhere. It is essentially the Istanbul of the North America, of the Western Hemisphere. So really good spot to get to, but that extra price, it's going to hurt for most people. It is worth noting, Aeromexico is an absolutely fantastic airlines, and it's a great airport to deal with. And if for any reason you get stuck in Mexico City, you're in Mexico City. You have access to absolutely anything. So if you're going to get stuck somewhere, there are a few places that are better than Mexico City for just being trapped. Panama City would be similar, that you have a ton of resources, lots to do, and whether you're stuck for a few extra hours or a few extra days, you're really in good shape. Neither one is outrageously expensive, so being stuck there and using that time to just enjoy the restaurants, go to the museums, check out neat neighborhoods, hit cocktail lounges, things that are difficult to do here, fantastic use of your time. So those are bonuses, but not something you want to plan around. It is nice to have the option. Beyond that, our flights go to the United States, primarily to Miami and Houston. Houston with United. I believe there's also now flights to Dallas with American and to Miami with Spirit. These are your U.S. connections currently. In the past, there was a direct connection from LAX. That is likely to return sometime in the future. Those things are coming back slowly. Those connections to the U.S. are very difficult unless you're an American passport holder, because you have to get visas, and they don't tend to favor visas for people coming from Nicaragua. If you're coming from Europe or something, they're going to look the other way, and it's very easy to get a visa. If you're Nicaraguan, it's extremely hard. Depends who you're traveling with and to and from. But so those connections are the important ones that we have to consider all the time. Traditionally, there is a hopper flight that goes to Havana, Cuba. That does not exist currently. That is the best of my understanding. I've looked into it. It seems to be closed right now. That I'm sure will come back. We have very good relationships with Cuba, and that is a very important flight path. If that comes back, that's going to open up a lot of doors for us, because while Havana is not the biggest city, it is a really well-connected one. And most importantly, Air Turkey, or Turkish Air, flies to Havana, Cuba, and that connects you to the entire old world. It is the most connected airline in the world, I believe, and certainly my favorite for doing really large-scale international connections through Istanbul. And so a direct flight from Havana to Istanbul, pretty amazing. We're never going to get that in Managua. So if we could get a hopper from Managua to Havana that is cheap and easy, because it's really not that far, then being able to just go to Havana Airport, catch a connection to Turkish Air, and the entire old world opens up to you, that would be amazing. We don't have that currently, but I'm hoping it comes back. The one new thing that we just saw, we were just in Managua Airport. This is perfect time to be asking these questions because I was at the airport on Monday. So actually, in the past from the time that I'm recording, but in the future from the time you're seeing this, but basically coming up on the 18th is the day I'm there. Went into the airport, and there is a new information kiosk for the flights directly to Caracas. This could be a game changer for us. I know nothing of it currently. I'm going to do some research on this. We will do a whole episode on it when I finally really know what's going on. But it looks like the Venezuelan flight paths have been open, and this gives us a completely new look at where we can go, both affordably and with direct access. I don't know what the offerings are going to be, but currently it looks like you can get directly to Caracas, and from there is a major hub that will take you all over South America, the Caribbean, potentially off to Europe and maybe Africa. Venezuela is a very well-connected country traditionally. Caracas is a major city, and they have always been one that really focuses on international connectivity. And so while they have been very limited in recent years, that is changing and is going to continue to change in the future. And thank goodness, Venezuela and Nicaragua have very close relations. So the ability for Nicaraguans to transit through Venezuela is extremely good. They do not need visas. They do not need pre-approval. As an American, I have to have not only a visa, but a pre-approved visa. I do not have the ability to get one on arrival, which is really annoying. That I wish would change in the future, but is not likely to. But it does make Venezuela a potential place to use to transit to other locations, or just to be able to visit Venezuela. It is a major destination for people in this region. It has been essentially off limits for the last several years, not completely, but essentially. But that is changing, and it is in a position where today you could visit it, and in the very near future you're probably going to want to visit it. Much like Nicaragua went through a period where everybody was really concerned and wondering if they should visit, and COVID hit and everyone kind of paused. Venezuela got stuck in that same boat. They're definitely trailing Nicaragua on recovery from a tourism perspective, but that is coming back, and they have been doing a lot with the country in the last 6 months. So we're hoping that flight path is going to open up a world of opportunities for all of us who are based here. But currently, Managua is very limited in where it can go, and you really are stuck, for all intents and purposes, using the bus for getting around the region. Now, the question was a little bit broader than that, and it's amazing how a one-line question prompted this much conversation. The question was also, what about the airports in Costa Rica? Now, these are far better connected, but mostly further afield. San Jose focuses mostly to the south, and so you have flights all through South America, Panama, and that region. Liberia tends to focus to the north, mostly North America, perhaps the Caribbean. So you choose your airport more or less based on where you're headed. Liberia essentially functions as an American small airport for tourists coming from the U.S., right? That is is its function. That it goes other places is just handy, but it exists because so many Americans are going to the Nicoya Peninsula, and that provides them direct access to that. From people from all over the world, people are going to San Jose and the capital, and some of the more popular overall tourist destinations in Costa Rica, and Americans go there too, of course. But the Nicoya Peninsula and that northwestern corner, which is very associated with Nicaragua historically, that has a tendency to be very focused with American travel. And so that airport specifically functions as an American point of entry. So because of that, we don't expect to find very many hoppers throughout the region from Liberia. People from the region don't want to go to Liberia. If you're coming from Nicaragua, you don't want to go to Liberia. That is not a very logical place. So we don't expect to see that. If you're going to see any hoppers, they're going to be from San Jose. That is quite a bit farther south and not really all that usable from Nicaragua. If you were going to look at going to places that you could potentially hop to, if those hops exist, such as Guatemala City, San Salvador, Tegucigalpa, and so forth within the Central American region, it would take from nearly anywhere in Nicaragua so long to get to San Jose Airport that you would be most of the way to the, so San Jose is very far to the south. You would be going somewhere to the north because everything else lies to the north. Had you taken the bus north instead of south, you would almost always be nearly to your destination just by the time you're arriving at the airport. And by the time you get into the airport, check into your flight, get onto your flight, fly to the place, get out of the airport. There is basically nowhere that you can't get to by bus faster and cheaper than by going through San Jose. If you live in Costa Rica and you're based in San Jose, by all means, there could be hoppers that could go places that make sense, and they will beat the bus because their bus is twice as far and their flight is right there. But if you're coming from up here in Nicaragua and you want to go all the way down to San Jose, that is an extremely long bus ride. I believe the last time we did it, it was in excess of 12 hours. And by the time you just do all the extra flights, get checked in, all those it just adds up really quickly. You'll never make it cost effective or time effective to try to use that airport. And because Liberia, I don't believe hops anywhere useful, I think we're out of luck as far as that goes. Now, this one ends up being a follow-up question to that. And Jeff Bateman stated, here's a practical travel complication that might be worth a conversation. Flights into Managua Airport are multiple times more expensive than flights into San Jose Airport. As a result, travelers can save hundreds of dollars by opting to fly into San Jose and then taking a bus like the Tica Bus, Transnica, Nica Expresso, all those, into Nicaragua, and save even more if they take local bus routes to the border, meaning like the chicken buses. Cross on foot and then take more local buses in Nicaragua to your final destination. For sure, that's the cheapest way to go. The complication, if you choose to save money in this way, is that Costa Rica requires you to show proof of onward and return travel in order to fly into anywhere. He mentions San Jose, but it's true in all their locations, including border crossings on foot. Many people, including myself, will purchase an inexpensive flight that they don't intend to use from San Jose and just consider this wasted flight an accepted cost because you still end up saving hundreds compared to flying directly into Managua. However, if there was a way to purchase a Tica Bus or Transnica ticket remotely, then you wouldn't need to waste money on a cheap flight that you don't intend to use. Knowing someone who lives in Nicaragua or Costa Rica can solve this problem because you can get them to buy the ticket for you and send you a copy that you can use to show proof of onward return travel. But if you don't know someone who lives locally, then it would be great help service business to offer this to travelers. So he's absolutely correct. This is how it works. Now, there's some complications there. One, he only mentions San Jose. It applies broadly across Costa Rica, so just don't think you can go to a different airport and work around it that way. The onward ticket by bus absolutely qualifies, and it meets every rule in Costa Rica. However, it is important to note a large number of corrupt airlines, this is a real problem that I know many people who've faced, will refuse to honor those bus tickets and will extort you for an additional return ticket on their airlines, regardless of the law. They'll simply lie about it and not take you on the plane. Then you have to fight them in court later, which is very difficult with international flights. It can be done, but it's extremely difficult. They are simply using the fact that they're using a law from another country and claiming that it applies to you in a different country. So you have to sue them internationally. Very difficult because you're stuck with different legal systems. And how do you actually prove that you didn't have to have that? It's their opinion, and their opinion rules. So you have to be very careful with the airlines. In some cases, they'll refuse even anything that isn't their own airline's return ticket because they're just doing things to make money, right? It's very corrupt. And Costa Rica provides very few traveler protections in this way. So you have to be careful. It's not a country like Nicaragua where you have a lot more protections from that sort of thing, or like in Europe, right? It's a lot more like the United States where the traveler is pretty much at risk. So be aware when traveling through Costa Rica that you may take on this risk and you may have to deal with it. Always be prepared to deal with it. Now, he mentions a few things that you can do, and that's fantastic. If you were to have that bus ticket and be all set, and we know people who've done this and carried the ticket with them, they came from here, they had the ticket already, and the airline still didn't let them on, that can be a problem. So you have to be prepared to have that flight regardless of what the law is. There are services for this, and there are means to make this work. One is there is a law in most countries that allows you to have a guaranteed ability to return your ticket if you return it within 24 hours. I don't have the details of this. I will get my wife to speak about it because she's the one that manages this for us. But we do this constantly, and the airlines expect it at this point because places like Costa Rica have forced the issue. Simply, you buy the ticket at the last minute, but not in the airport. Buy it just before you go to the airport. Trust me, it's better. Have it. Get ready, go, show your return ticket, and the instant you are taking off from the gate or the instant you land, cancel the ticket and get your money back. This works great. And the reason that Costa Rica is okay with this is because the goal of the system is to guarantee you have the financial resources to leave. By showing you had already purchased a ticket, you had the resources to leave. That you then cancel it, they can't help. So they're stuck, whether you cancel it immediately or in a week or in 89 days. One way or another, you did have the resources to leave. It's the best they can do to show that you'll not be stuck in the country. That's why they do that. I don't think it's a good mechanism. I don't agree with it, but there is a logic to it. And if you understand that logic, you kind of know how to use the system. So you're able to buy the ticket at the last minute, get your money back, and you don't need to do anything complicated or worry about a bus ticket. You do have to remember to cancel it. Trust me, set yourself a reminder all the time. No matter how many times I tell people, set a reminder. Everyone comes up with an excuse why I don't work by calendars. I don't use reminders. I'll remember. No, you won't. You will not remember. You are an adult. Presumably, set an alarm for yourself. Just do it. Then get your money back. It's free. If you're so concerned, and this is legit, that you're on vacation, you're going to forget, right? You're not going to check your alarm. You're on vacation. Whatever. I get it. There are services, and I'll try my best to get a link for this, where you pay a small fee, and they actually cancel for you. So you actually buy your ticket through them. They give you whatever ticket it is required for you to have. And as soon as you touch down and arrive in your destination, they automatically cancel the ticket, and you just pay a small fee for that, and it's all handled. It's a neat system. It's a cool business idea. And that's actually what he was talking about. Like, it would be cool if someone had a business to make these things possible. For sure, for example, because I live here in Nicaragua and because I have easy access to Costa Rica, I could run a service where we get you those tickets for the buses. And that would make a lot of sense. And if you're going to use them actually as bus tickets, there's some value to that. But it's low because you can get it yourself. But I can see some value there. That would be cool. To some degree, you can get some stuff online, but very little. So for sure, we're having someone run around and go to the actual offices and get the physical tickets and make sure you have that does have value. There is a business there. However, it's not going to compete with the airline ones that already exist because they work worldwide, not just in one location. And they give you actual airline tickets, which bypasses the only airline tickets counts scam being run by many airlines. So that is a real thing to be aware of. But there are workarounds that you can do. Definitely prepare for it. Do your research. Ask your questions below. We'll talk about it more. I'll get my wife on, who deals with it all the time, and she'll explain exactly what the rules are and how to do it for Costa Rica and for many other places. So that's a real thing. Now, the cost of tickets being much lower to San Jose, this really depends where you're coming from. In many cases, the tickets are actually cheaper from Managua. So it's not a given that San Jose is going to be cheaper. On average, for sure, he's correct. San Jose is a very low-cost airport. Managua leans towards a kind of mid-cost airport. Liberia is closer to San Jose, but still in the middle. San Jose is the cheapest of all the airports in the region. It's by far the biggest, has the most connections, the most traffic. If you're going to like South America, nothing's going to compete with it. But if you're going to places like Texas, Managua is actually the cheapest. Specifically because we're dealing with family who live right by a specific airport in Texas, we go down to Liberia sometimes to fly out of Costa Rica on Southwest because it goes directly next to my family in Houston, and we don't have to do anything complicated. We just get out of the airport, we can take a taxi to the house in a few minutes. Family, anyone can pick us up. My niece can pick us up, or right around the corner. It's so easy, and if anything goes wrong, we're around the corner. And we know where we are. We know the area. It's practically a bicycle ride away from the family. So we do that and put all of our travel effort on this side of the trip in many cases, but we spend a little bit extra to do it. If we were to, well, $10. If we were to fly out of Managua, we'd have to fly Spirit, and getting a connection to Houston while possible isn't as good as a connection to Dallas in our experience. Dallas being a few hours away from the family, but the Houston airport that Spirit flies into, IAH or Houston Bush Intercontinental Airport, is more than an hour away from the family, and you have to drive all the way through Houston in really nasty nasty traffic 24 hours a day. It's Houston to get there. And so it's very stressful. It takes a lot of time. Someone has to leave long before you've landed. For us, they'd have to leave like basically when we take off from the airport to get there at the right time. That's nuts. And so if anything goes wrong, communications and everything, it's a nightmare for us specifically. But our flights to Houston Hobby on Southwest are generally like $130 to $160, whereas flights from Managua to Houston Intercontinental or to Dallas are much more like $90 to $110. That's a nice savings, and we don't have to deal with the expensive trip of getting to the Costa Rican border, the taxi past the Costa Rican border, any cost to get through the Costa Rican border. Is a whole 2 fewer border crossings as we go. So in many cases, you will actually find Managua cheaper. And I did this for one of my viewers yesterday. We had a phone call through info@relocatenicaragua.com. We offer services specifically consulting on this. I'll just throw that out there. It's a perfect time to mention it. And we had a conversation, and they were looking at going to Liberia specifically for these reasons. Like, oh, there's more flights. It'll be easy. We'll just take the bus. And actually, they were looking at San Jose when they realized that the bus added $85 to the cost of the flight. And it added a 12-hour trip to the flight. And it added meals and potentially a stay and complications and a border crossing. There are times you actually want the border crossing. We'll talk about this some other times. It's mostly for customs reasons. But by and large, you don't want to add an extra border crossing. You're going to cross from, in this case, the United States into Nicaragua, but wherever you're coming from, into Nicaragua is a given. What you don't want to do extra, if you can help it, is cross into Costa Rica and then into Nicaragua. You're not reducing anything. You're adding an extra border crossing. Given Costa Rica is normally a very simple border crossing, and Costa Rica into Nicaragua is not a terrible border crossing, but it's extra. Whereas if you go directly into Nicaragua, it's less. So that's a benefit that you may want to consider. Overall, it is very rare, if coming from North America or Europe, that we find coming through Costa Rica to be cost competitive with Managua. Managua remains cheaper most of the time now that flights have returned. If we're going to South America, for example, as I'm heading to Bolivia in November, then taking a bus to San Jose, as he described in this article, in this comment, absolutely. I'm looking at saving thousands of dollars. He said 3 times the price. No, it's like 10 times the price that I'm saving. I'm able to fly to South America for as little as $50 and able to fly to Bolivia for as little as like $180, maybe $220, something like that. I have friends who are going down there looking at thousands of dollars to fly into Bolivia because they're going to come from Managua. That difference is huge. So it can easily be more than 3 times. But you really have to look at the circumstance and don't assume it's going to be cheaper. Look at the whole picture. I would say for the bulk of people coming, the majority of the time, you're actually going to find that the total package today, now that flights have returned, into Managua is going to be your better bet. It's just easier, it's probably cheaper, and it's just faster. You're going to get way more time, not in the air, not in a bus. But it's worth considering that San Jose is a phenomenally large airport with connections all over the world, and that Liberia has quite a few connections to North America and some pretty popular destinations, and they can work pretty well. And it's worth noting that if you go to Liberia, all those things are minimized. Your size of the airport, it's just much easier to deal with. The cost of things near the airport, much lower. You may not need to take the bus. You may be able to take a taxi to the border. Things are much more affordable because the distances and the time is much reduced. So Liberia, if you're coming from North America, is a common option. If you are coming from South America, San Jose. But if you're coming from a location that has a decent connection to Managua, chances are that's going to be your best bet. All right, our third and final question for the day is from Tyler Hoffland. How walkable is Managua? Well, this is a tough one because how walkable a city has a lot of different artifacts. Now, if you watch my videos from a couple weeks ago, I was in Managua for a wedding, and I went out and did some serious walking around the city to show a bit of more or less downtown. We kind of started from the area just north of Plaza Central America and walked north up to Plaza Intour. It covered quite a bit of ground over a period of 2 days and show that area of the city. Now, it's a pretty nice area of the city. It's on the Carretera Messiah, which is a very wealthy road with a lot of traffic, so you're going to be quite safe and pretty accessible. They're going to have nice sidewalks. There's lots of things along the way to, stop at a 7-Eleven type place and get a drink. It's easy to get food. It's easy to stop at a hotel, whatever you want to do. Lots of things along that path, including the mall, right? So you really flush with options. But overall, I think Managua falls into a very middle ground of walkability. For the most part, it's a flat city. There's not too much elevation change throughout the city, a little for sure, and especially if you get to the outskirts, then it's up against mountains. But mostly it's low-lying along a lake, and so you get a pretty flat, easily walkable area. You're never going to be really struggling to go up and down hills until you get pretty far on the south side of the city. Then you could end up with some pretty steep hills for walking for sure. Much of the city is quite safe, and that makes it pretty easy to go out and walk around. And I try to, on a regular basis, do so because it's much more interesting to see the city that way, and you really get to know it in a different way. If you're just driving through, you really get this shallow, cursory kind of feeling for a city, and I hate that. So I try to avoid that whenever possible. But it is worth noting two important things. One is that while Nicaragua is an incredibly safe country, nearly all of the crime in the country, other than San Juan del Sur in the south, is in Managua. It is just a big city, and so it has big city type crime issues. Not as bad as most large cities in the area. It's nothing like San Jose, Costa Rica. It's nothing like Tegucigalpa or San Pedro Sula in Honduras, but it is not safe like Leon, where I can just walk anywhere, anytime, leave my camera on the street and not have to worry about anything. I'm not very likely to get stabbed in the street, but someone grabbing my camera is a real thing. You want to keep, pay attention to your wallet, notice where people are, don't be stupid, don't try to look like a tourist, and if you're like me, there's no hope. It's a big city. So can you walk around it? It does. So really importantly, it does not have a downtown. If you were in Guatemala City, for example, which is many times the size of Managua. So it's so large, in fact, that it is essentially the same size as the country of Nicaragua squeezed into a single city. With Guate, or Guatemala City, you're able to walk around an area that is essentially downtown. It doesn't have a really strong central, like this is specifically downtown, like some cities do, but it does have some areas that are very downtown-ish, and you can walk for many blocks, dozens of blocks in any direction, and you stay within a very safe zone, a very walkable zone, flat and full of shops and stuff that are selling to people walking by, right? Cafes on the street, restaurants on the street, shopping centers on the street, things that they're meant for you to walk by and look in the windows. In Managua, there's a lot less of that, and there's no zone like that. The closest thing that comes to it is the Capitol Zone, which is meant for people to go see their capital, much like the Capitol Mall in Washington, D.C. It is not a place with restaurants or bars or anything that you're going to go do other than go see the government buildings, right? And it's beautiful and it's safe and it's nice, but it's not like you're going to walk around and just enjoy being in the city. Maybe as a tourist, you might want to walk that one little zone, but for an hour or two, and that's the end of it. Because of the low-lying, non-skyscraper nature of Managua, which is caused by the 1972 earthquake, the city sprawls and feels like a large collection of interconnected villages. And because of that, any individual village tends to be pretty walkable. And I'll use the example that I go to quite often of Los Robles or the Villa Fontaine, which is very close. Those areas, you can walk around pretty easily. Now, of course, I picked one that does actually have an elevation change, so you're going to go up the hill a little bit, but it's not bad. And I showed an area very close to it in the video that I did a couple weeks ago. And in Los Robles, for example, I can walk from a number of hotels to a number of restaurants to a number of nightclubs. I can get a taxi. I can see a lot of places where people have office buildings and different types of businesses, and all that's extremely walkable and extremely safe. Like, there's no reason not to walk around. Even at night, I feel very comfortable walking around, as does my wife, right? Like, we're able to walk around that area pretty much anytime, anywhere, doing any activity, and it feels very safe. So Managua has those zones, and they're walkable. So if you're out trying to walk around and see the sights of Managua, then walking around is going to be extremely difficult, bordering on impossible. You'll be forced to go through neighborhoods that you shouldn't walk through. You'll be in areas where you're going through large expanses of space with nothing to see and nothing to do that could lead you to get lost or have other problems. It's just not plausible in any meaningful way. But if you're in a small area of the city and need to get from one thing to another, then it generally is pretty walkable. So it really depends what you're looking for. If you want to live in Managua and you want to get an apartment in a nice area and you want to know if you can walk to cafes and restaurants and things like that, then yes, very potentially you could work out a space that works that way. If you are looking for being a tourist and you want to be able to get around the entire city and you're hoping to not need a taxi or anything like that, then you're going to be very out of luck, not because the city is unsafe, but because it essentially isn't designed for walking traffic due to things beyond the control of the city planners. Hope that answers that for you. Remember to like and subscribe. Ask your questions below if you have anything else. If you'd like to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ScottAlMiller. That goes a long way to help making this channel and the other channels that we do, like Nicaragua 360 and Drive Warp, possible. And of course, the new channel that I'm helping out with, Nicaragua, where we showcase live events from around the country. Right now, mostly in Leon as we get up to speed with recording and different processes, but we have several shows already live and more coming soon. So if you want to just see the music and bands and venues of Nicaragua, there's no commentary. It's just watching some bands play. Go check them out. Great thing to leave on in the background. Go subscribe and help support that channel. Share with your friends, tell your family, post on social media, and I will see all of you tomorrow.